Good evening. Here's our news bulletin for this evening. Baby elephant Angelie finally arrived last Friday and was enthusiastically welcomed by the many that turned up to get a glimpse of Niue's very first elephant. International Women's Day was celebrated with much fanfare last Friday as the National Council of Women marched, sang, celebrating their successes and of course remembered their struggles to achieve a better standard of living. Television reception around the island has been severely affected again following lightning strikes during last weekend's bad weather. Two visitors to Niue look back over 50 years with fond memories of their youth spent here in Niue, despite being here during the time of New Zealand Commissioner Hector Larson's murder. Baby elephant Angelie finally arrived last Friday and was enthusiastically welcomed at the airport by the many that turned up to get a glimpse of Niue's very first elephant. The adorable young elephant travelled 12 hours from Sri Lanka to Auckland and then a further 4 hours to Niue via Air New Zealand's Air Force Hercules. She was accompanied by Sri Lanka's Pinawala Elephant Orphanage staff and Auckland Zoo handlers. Although public access was restricted, many were keen to witness the landing, with spectators lining the fence line in anticipation at the airport. There was not much to see of the baby elephant as it was unloaded in a covered transport carrier, although those close by did manage a wee glimpse of the 8-year-old. With the transfer from the aircraft successfully completed, Angelie was transferred to her temporary residence at Kaho in the village of Avaseli. The young elephant seemed in high spirits in her new environment, eagerly snapping up fresh fruit from her carers. After the quarantine period, Angelie will be flown to her final destination at the Auckland Zoo in New Zealand, where she will reside along Burma, a 38-year-old elephant. International Women's Day was celebrated with much fanfare last Friday as the National Council of Women marched, sang and celebrated their successes and remembered the challenges and achievements. The event involved women members of Parliament of past and present playing a leading role with the motivational and inspiring speeches.
Why are we leaving the decision-making to men only in our country? This is a very important question to ask. Why? Because when you consider consequences of this for our future, for our children and our next generations, political surveys shows that male-oriented decisions tend to prioritize foreign affairs. With our female, our priorities tend to focus on the home, towards the care of our natural resources, education and health. International Women's Day is a time to reflect on progress made, to continue to call for change and to celebrate acts of courage of women who have played an extraordinary role in the history of their countries and communities. The United Nations theme for 2015 for the women is Empowering Women, Empowering Humanity. Picture it. The theme envisions a world where each woman and girl can exercise her choices, such as participating in politics, getting an education, having an income, and living in societies free from violence and discrimination.
The occasion began in the morning with banners and songs as they marched from the commercial centre to Makini Hall. Participants were dressed in the very best purple attire, in line with the Caribbean theme from the Isle of Bahamas. The celebration also featured a fashion show exhibiting women's creativity in technique and design. The International Women's Day theme was Empowering Women and Motivating Women to Make It Happen. The celebrations continued with songs, activities and, of course, refreshments. Television reception around the island has been severely affected following lightning strikes during last week's bad weather. The problem arises just 1 week after the Broadcasting Corporation was able to re-establish TV services after problems with a different part to their communications infrastructure at the Sekana Tower. General Manager Trevor Siakia says this time the damage is to the encoder at the studio itself that encodes and sends a signal to the repeater site at Sekana. He says this is disappointing as the previous problem at Sekana site had just been repaired. Trevor says the parts for the encoder have been ordered, but repairs may take a while to complete. In the meantime, he is advising viewers to face your antennas towards the broadcaster tower at BCN at Hui Hui, and that it may be a while to get some reception. He is also urging viewer patience as they try to resolve the problem. Two visitors to Niue look back over 50 years with fond memories of their youth spent in Niue, despite the fact that being here during the time of the New Zealand Commissioner Hector Larson's murder. Ray Henderson and Carol Warren were just young children way back in the 1950s when they spent a short time, but memorable time, of their young lives during some of Niue's most tumultuous history. Housed at the Aliluki Flats, they vividly recall the period when New Zealand High Commissioner Hector Larson was murdered by inmates from the local prison. The two youngsters at the time lived right by the hospital where their parents were expatriate doctors, and they were also the ones that treated the victims and the families.
Yes. The first I knew, first event was the
Larson murder.
The Larson murder. 1 o'clock in the morning, Billy Larson knocked on my window and asked me to get my dad. And I used to sleepwalk a lot in those days, and so I went in to see my father and said, Billy Larson's at the window and you have to come. And he didn't believe me, and I insisted. And when we got to the window, Billy was there and he had blood all over the torch, and they had cut the wires, so there was no phone communication. And he had run down that hill through the bush to alert the doctor. And my father went straight away on his little motorbike and went up to the...
But left messages with my mother to ring the police and various other people to tell them what had happened, so that before long there was, as many people as possible were up there.
Yes.
Because when Dad arrived, of course, Mr. Larson was still alive, but she had been very badly chopped around, and so there were lots of, obviously they needed medical
attention
straight away.
Must have been quite a traumatic experience for you as young children at that time?
Yes, I suppose my parents, they shielded us from it. We were all put in one house, the schoolhouse, and with all the European wives and children.
And guards.
And when they were looking for the three men, the men all went off each day, but we were, just safe, I suppose. And we thought it was quite fun because you're just with your other friends, and we didn't know the seriousness of it.
The pair also had a few other fond memories of their time spent here. They also recall the vast difference between then and now.
Well, I can remember at one stage the Governor-General from New Zealand came in 1954, so after the coronation, but to celebrate, to recognise Niue after the coronation, and the big warship, the Black Prince, was moored off, and they had parties and welcomes and kais and feasts.
Everyone
and things,
was dressed up.
Everyone was dressed up, and
it
went on for about 3 days, I think, and they went around the whole island and visited everything, and there were lots of, parties and welcomes, and that was one event. And of course, also the coronation.
It was in June 53.
Just after we arrived, and there was lots of marching and 21 gun salutes, which, according to my mother's diary, the guns went off at very intermittent intervals.
The last one was about half an hour after everyone else had shot. They were almost a sigh of relief and claps when the last gun finally made it. They had to keep reloading, you see.
But the other thing was the flying boat that arrived, because of course there was no airport and none of the Niueans had seen an aeroplane. And this flying boat arrived to evacuate a badly injured man. And the whole island's population accumulated on the coast just out from Alofi and watched this big bird come out of the sky. That was pretty exciting.
Everyone had a day off school, as you did every time the boat came in. The Tofua, we all had a day off school, so that was good fun.
So those were the sort of main things: the coronation, the Black Prince, the Sunderland flying boat, and the Larson thing were the four main things that we remember from our time here.
This week, Ray and Carol are trying to reunite with friends that they knew way back then, as well as wishing for some good weather so that they can go out for a decent swim in their favourite swimming spots on the island. And to end our BCN bulletin this evening, The Secretariat of the Pacific Community will be holding a major meeting in Niue later this year, but as yet a theme for the event has yet to be selected. Local counterparts are still seeking submissions for a national theme which will showcase Niue during the event. Submissions close this Thursday, and we will bring you an update on the preparations at a later date, hopefully at the end of this week. And that brings an end to our BCN News this evening. We'll see you again later on in the week. Until then, nono foa.